Well, I DNF'd Wind and Truth. Let's talk about it. What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Reform Reader, the channel where we review books, movies, shows through the lens of a Christian under the authority of the scriptures. So yeah, as the intro suggested, I DNF'd Wind and Truth, which is book 5 of the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. Now, this is a series that I have absolutely loved. Book 2, Words of Radiance, has been one of my all-time favorite books. And so it's very sad for me to say that I had to DNF this book. So I'm just going to jump right into it and say there's going to be some mild spoilers here, but this video is going to be predominantly for people that are looking to start the series. I want to kind of give you an overview of what to expect. So yeah, why did I DNF book 5? It really came down to two things, but there's definitely more than that, but two things in particular, any one of which would have caused me to DNF any book. But just as a quick backstory, Brandon Sanderson is a Mormon. And so for over the past like 3 or 4 years that I've really been reading heavily, his books have always been safe. As far as content goes, I know that it's safe for me to read his works because there's nothing explicit. The violence isn't overtly violent, or there's no really very little to no mentions of like sexual assault or anything like that. So his books have been very safe. They've just been good books. I've been able to recommend them for years, and now sadly I won't be able to recommend his works probably for the foreseeable future. So what occurred? Well, just as a disclaimer, I did not get very far into the book. I only got a few chapters, which is still like, I think it was almost 200 pages. I think this is like a 1,500 page book. But I could definitely see where he was going. And you can see it in book 4 with Renarin in particular. So one of my hangups is that he decided to include same-sex relationships in his books. Now, for any of those naysayers that are like, well, this was in book 2 or this was in book 3, while it was present, the intentionality there was quite a bit different. And what I mean is there's a character, I think he's in book 2. His name is Drahe, I think is how you pronounce it. But anyway, it was a very passing glance of a mention of him being in a same-sex relationship. And when Sanderson was asked about it, he said that he felt disingenuous not to include things like that because it was real. Now, I still disagree with it. But it's similar to me to like watching Saving Private Ryan, and people that are like, well, it's got bad language in it, so I'm not going to watch that. And while I understand that, I also understand the context there, that it's it's real. So to say that with his books, I was like, I understand that he's adding these real elements. He talks about mental health a lot in his books and things like that, that with these real elements, he's making his world feel more real to the reader. And so there's things in his books like sexual assault, there's some swearing in there, some very minor swearing. There's slavery, there's murder, brutality, there's just all different kinds of sins. And so he at no point was promoting these things up until this book. And that's really what it comes down to, is previously, like when Kaladin was sold into slavery, at no point did he say, hey, slavery is good and we should go do that thing, or you should emulate this, or I'm trying to convince you that this ought to be promoted. But in this book, that changed. And so with a character Renarin in book 4, you could definitely see could see that he had more of a same-sex attraction, but there was nothing. It was really just like speculative. There's nothing in there that was concrete. And so of what I read, I could see where it was going. And I asked somebody that I had, I have a lot of confidence in, a fellow Christian, and he had finished the book, and he said, don't read it. It includes this same-sex relationship. It's very prevalent in the story. It's, it focuses on it quite a bit. It's enough to where he knows me, that he knows that he's like, don't waste your time, because this book I think is sitting at like 52 hours on Audible. So don't waste your time. Just, go on to something else. So that's strike one. Well, just as a pause there. So I closed the book, I sent it back, and I posted my review on Goodreads. I put a 1-star review, and I put why. Because as a Christian, I think it's important for me when I'm doing book reviews, not that a bunch of people see them, but this one in particular, a lot of people did. But I think it's important that, I said, well, I DNF'd this book for a same-sex relationship. That's an instant DNF for me. And so, I just don't want to be entertained by that. These are the types of comments I got from people who are overtly tolerant with people that don't want to be entertained by those things. And so I got flooded with these comments, and this was before I decided to start any kind of like a review channel or anything. And it was I've got pretty thick skin, and so some of the comments were creative. Some of them made me laugh a little bit. Really, I was just like, man, these people, I'm very sad, because they've convinced themselves and have been convinced that sin is good. And then I got other comments like this. And it was really surprising to me the amount of comments I got that were encouraging, or that people were actually curious, or really, I think there was about a third of the comments that were other Christians saying, thank you for posting this, because, they were kind of where I was. They were unsure of whether or not they should continue reading or even pick the book up if it contained that. So I saved them some time and things like that. I think it's important for us to specify why we do not want to be entertained by these things. Because the other thing he included was a very explicit scene between a married couple. Now, if you've read any of his other books like Mistborn, he has a very fade to black direction when it comes to things like that, which has always been perfectly fine with me. But with this, apparently there's a particular scene that gets very explicit. And, I don't want to be entertained by that either. It's sin. It's a promotion of it's pornographic. It's pornographic. It's just, instead of pictures, it's words, which is just as bad. You're imagining these things in your mind, and you're dwelling on them. Really, that's what it comes down to, is that we don't need to be entertained by sin, by the promotion of it. Now, again, there's the argument of, well, you watch violent movies, and violence is sinful, or you watch movies where people lie, and I don't see you say anything about that, or slavery and all these things. Again, it's about the promotion and the intentionality of the author or the writer or whoever, the director. It's about the intention behind the work. And when you can tell that there is intention to promote same-sex marriage or a same-sex lifestyle, or to promote infidelity, or to promote promiscuity, or promote pornography, or anything like that, when it's included in any work, I don't care if it's a book, a movie, a show, like, we don't need to be entertained by those things. And what was crazy to me is when I put that 1-star review, people took it as like an affront, that like I was attacking them. And I understand to a degree, because, I get caught up in certain fandoms and things like that. And if people decide to, say negative things about it, I'm like, well, I like that thing, and this guy doesn't like that thing. So what he's saying is, he's saying he doesn't like something about me, and which is obviously ludicrous, but I think it occurs with most people. I mean, you look at sports teams, a rivalry here locally, it would be like Alabama and Auburn football. There are some people that legitimately dislike someone else because of their affiliation with the football team. And so it's not too far of a stretch to say, well, when somebody starts going on the affront to any type of fandom that I have, that I could take offense to it. It's in our nature to do so. But for Christians, we have to remember that this is entertainment. that with books, movies, TV shows, sports games, whatever, this is what we are being entertained by. We're spending our free time and our own money that the Lord has given us and blessed us with, that he is expecting us to be good stewards of. And we're using that to help to help promote sin, because we are spending that money to send to an author who is promoting it. What we have to remind ourselves of is this is just entertainment, and that my time is probably better spent on something else. I'm not saying, well, you need to just go read Pilgrim's Progress again, which is maybe you should, or maybe you should go read Narnia. But the same people that took offense to me saying, well, I don't want to be entertained by same-sex marriage or a same-sex relationship or an explicit scene in a book, those are the very same people that are upset that C.S. Lewis included Christianity in his works. It's like, well, so when they do that, it's really just, it's hypocritical. It's not me like, oh, you're being a hypocrite, but it's me pointing at me saying, well, I don't want to be a hypocrite by saying, well, I believe and am subjecting myself to the authority of Scripture, which tells me these things are not just sinful, but they're detestable. And yet I'm going to be entertained by them. I think you're going to have a difficult time convincing someone of that. And so it always, anytime with a book recommendation or review, they always come down to this for me, is when my son, who's 11 years old, when he goes to my bookshelf and he picks any book up off of my shelves and opens the page, am I going to be ashamed by what he finds? And now what I mean by that is, not all books are for all ages. I used this example talking to some friends last night. I said, if he pulled The Diary of Anne Frank off of my shelf, which is a fantastic book, right now, I would not want him. I would actually make sure I would not recommend that he read that book at his current age and maturity level. He's not ready for that. But that's very different from me going, okay, well, this isn't for you quite yet. It's very different from going from that to saying, or to thinking, having that inner dialogue of, I'm ashamed that he knows that I'm being entertained by this. So that's always a good litmus test for me. If you don't have kids and you're like, maybe it's like, would you recommend this book to your pastor? Even if he likes sci-fi and fantasy stuff, would you be able to recommend this to him with a clean conscience? So most of the time my book reviews are going to be, would I recommend this to a Christian? I would normally say it depends, because people's convictions and their intensity of those convictions vary, and my own do. So for instance, there are books that I used to love that I now can't recommend, and I've actually had to pull from my shelves over the past few years of just hopefully, maturing as a Christian. There's some things that I'm like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't be entertained by this. And there's one in particular that I'll go into at a later date, but it was one of my favorite books. It really got me back into reading, and I bought it for somebody else. And they're like, I'm really surprised you like this. I said, why? I hadn't read it in about a year. So I reread it, and I had to throw it in the garbage. And so I hope that occurs with each of us as Christians. I hope we get to the point to where we're maturing in our faith, that there are movies that I won't watch anymore, that there's TV shows that I won't watch anymore. There's books I won't read anymore. There's games I won't play anymore. Fill in the blank. There's things that I have realized are sinful and are soaked in sin that I don't need to be entertained by. Going forward, I do not think that I can recommend any of the works of Brandon Sanderson. As a matter of fact, if you're watching this and you haven't read any of his works, I had a friend of mine, he asked me last night, he's like, well, would you recommend any of his works to a new reader now? I'm like, well, no, probably not. And the reason is because, even if you're reading like the Mistborn series, which I love the Mistborn series, but for a new reader, would I advise you to go and spend money and send that towards this author? The answer is no, because he's not seeing what you're buying or why you're buying it. He's just seeing, residual income from the publisher. And so all he is seeing is that people like my work, and so I'm going to continue this type of work. There needs to be those hard lines sometimes that we need to draw. Now, with all that, Brandon Sanderson himself said that he was taking a risk writing this book. He said, I know that I'm taking a risk, a huge risk in writing this, and I will probably lose some of my fan base. And for some people, apparently, on Goodreads, they championed him for it. But for me, the risk was not worth taking. So I DNF'd when in truth, I will not be reading any more of Brandon Sanderson's works unless, I pray to God that he comes to repentance and turns from this, and in which case, we'll see. I hope that's the case. But, if you're still like, well, I'm not sure whether, maybe I don't have as strong convictions about that. I'm not trying to convince you one way or the other. I'm just telling you where I'm at. And I want to give you as much information from one Christian to another as I can. And I want to leave you with this. It's Philippians 4:8. It reads, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is dignified, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence and anything worthy of praise, consider these things. The things that you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. And so if you can say, hey, I've read these books and I go away with a clean conscience, I would actually probably ask, well, why did you? So I'm not trying to convict you if you're reading these things, but it's my hope that the Spirit is continually maturing you, and to the point to where we don't want to be entertained by these things. I appreciate you guys for sticking around for the video. If you have any comments or suggestions, or you need further clarification, more than welcome to leave a comment. I'll get back with you as soon as I can. But otherwise, guys, I appreciate your time, and I'll see you on the next one.